An unemployed woman with money problems goes to work for her bail bondsman cousin as a bounty hunter, tracking down clients who fail to appear for their court dates. In the first novel by author Janet Evanovich to feature Stephanie Plum, it's 1994's One for the Money, along with a 2012 film of the same name, directed by Julie Ann Robinson and starring Katherine Heigl. Welcome to Crime Novels to Film. I'm Jeffrey A. Cooper. Stephanie Plum narrates her own story. She's newly divorced, has been laid off from her job as a lingerie salesperson, and is desperate to find work before the few things she has are repossessed for non-payment. Stephanie is steered in the direction of her dodgy cousin Vinny, a bail bondsman, for work. When she gets to Vinny's office, Stephanie learns about the money she could make as a bounty hunter, and she corners Vinny into giving her a chance. Stephanie's first assignment is to catch Trenton police officer Joe Morelli, charged with murder. She makes several failed attempts to arrest Morelli, then turns to a fellow bounty hunter named Ranger and asks him to teach her the job. Ranger gives Stephanie a gun and starts teaching her the ins and outs of bond enforcement. He also gives Stephanie the background on the Morelli case. Joe Morelli shot a guy named Ziggy Kuleska in the apartment of a prostitute named Carmen Sanchez. Morelli claims self-defense in the shooting, but neither a gun nor Carmen Sanchez can be found to verify that story. Stephanie starts to track down people associated with Ziggy Kuleska, hoping they will lead her to Morelli. Two of these people are a heavyweight boxing champion named Benito Ramirez and his manager Jimmy Alpha, who she meets in their dodgy boxing gym in an equally dodgy neighborhood. Benito Ramirez is a dangerous sexual predator, and he focuses his sights on Stephanie. Stephanie holds Ramirez off, which angers Ramirez, and he attacks Stephanie before Morelli appears and fires his gun, which scares Ramirez, then Morelli disappears again. Morelli is an experienced cop, and the inexperienced Stephanie annoys him with her repeated efforts to bring him in. She takes Morelli's Jeep, hoping to draw Morelli out. Morelli surprises Stephanie when she's in the shower and handcuffs her to a curtain rod, forcing Stephanie to call Ranger to get her out. Stephanie tries to track down Carmen Sanchez and talks with two of her working girlfriends, Lula and Jackie, who tell her that Carmen has disappeared. Stephanie meets Jimmy Alpha, Ramirez's manager, who admits that Ramirez's behavior is a little crazy and apologizes for his fighter. Stephanie then discovers that another eyewitness, John Cusack, has been shot to death outside his apartment. Ramirez, meanwhile, steps up his stalking of Stephanie, but she continues to put off his advances. This angers Ramirez even more, so he cuts and rapes Lula, then ties her to Stephanie's balcony. Stephanie gets Lula to a hospital, saving Lula's life. When she gets home, Morelli is in her apartment and makes Stephanie a deal. Help him prove that he shot Ziggy in self-defense, and in return, he'll see that Stephanie collects the $10,000 bounty on him. Morelli says there's another witness to the shooting that can back his story, and he's been scouring the city trying to find them. He tells Stephanie not to go out, but Stephanie goes out to find Ramirez and does. Ramirez punches Stephanie and she pepper sprays him. Jimmy Alpha pleads with Stephanie not to press charges. Byers, another recovery agent, discovers Morelli's van, so Morelli leaves. Byers shows up at her apartment and discovers Morelli's Jeep, which he tries to take to draw Morelli out, but the Jeep explodes when Byers starts it up. Stephanie finds Morelli's witness. He's a meat delivery guy from Philadelphia named Lewis, and Stephanie follows him to a marina cold storage facility. Morelli meets Stephanie at the marina, and they search for Lewis, finding both him, Carmen, and another guy murdered in a refrigerator truck. They also discover a drop boat and evidence of heroin smuggling. Morelli gets nervous. His witness is dead, and he can't find the murder weapon, which he needs to prove his innocence. He gets cocky, so Stephanie locks him inside the refrigerator truck and takes him to the police station where she collects her $10,000 bounty. She goes home and discovers that Jimmy Alpha has broken in. He explains what happened. Jimmy got involved in things like heroin smuggling to diversify his assets because Benito Ramirez is such a loose cannon. The problem is, Jimmy works with careless people like Lewis, whose carelessness means that he later has to go back and take care of any loose ends. He's setting up Ramirez to come get Stephanie at her apartment, but Stephanie fights Jimmy off. Jimmy shoots Stephanie, then she grabs her gun and fires back. A few days later, Stephanie recovers from her gunshot wound. Ramirez was arrested breaking into her apartment, and Jimmy was killed after Stephanie fired back at him. Morelli reveals that he left a recorder attached to a utility pole that picked up Jimmy's confession. Morelli has been cleared of all charges and reinstated as a police officer. Morelli asks Stephanie if she's going to continue working for Vinny, and I think we all know how that turns out. One for the Money was an enjoyable, entertaining read. I thought Stephanie Plum was a funny, self-deprecating narrator, and it was easy for me to see how this series about the former lingerie salesperson turned bounty hunter has been so successful. Stephanie Plum is a very relatable hero. She tells her history living in an Italian neighborhood in Trenton, New Jersey, and it's filled with the same kind of awkward life experiences that we all have. She's got a kooky family that badgers her about not having a man, and they put her on awkward blind dates with people she's clearly not interested in. I'm sure more than a few of us have had to go to a relative asking for a job like Stephanie does with Vinny. We've all been there at one time or another, having to find creative solutions to life problems like losing a job, getting your car repossessed, and taking on a job that might be dangerous, one that you're not sure you're really qualified for, but you do it because you really need the money. I admired Stephanie Plum's toughness. She's gutsy, like when she goes to the dodgy third-rate gym where boxer Benito Ramirez trains, then sets herself out as bait in order to arrest him. Given the number of books in the series, I think it's safe for me to assume that Stephanie gets much better at the bounty hunting. Of course, if it were easy to get good at the bounty hunting, there would probably be a lot less books in this series. Despite the success of One for the Money, it took 18 years and 19 Stephanie Plum novels for the screen adaptation of One for the Money to finally hit movie screens. The novel was optioned in February of 2010. The project had a script a month later, then went into pre-production at the end of June. The 91-minute film was released on January 27, 2012 in the United States. The film was considered a box office disappointment by everyone involved and halted plans for adapting the second book in the series, Two for the Dough. For me, the fluctuating tone of the film was a problem the novel didn't have. The film goes from violence to humor to romantic comedy to crime drama, sometimes in the same scene. There's not much chemistry between Jason O'Mara's Joe Morelli and Katherine Heigl's Stephanie Plum. I get that they want to sleep together, but it's more in a late-night bar hookup kind of way than a genuine attraction. Heigl's chemistry with Daniel Sunjata, who played Ranger, was much stronger. Their scenes had some heat. I knew that Stephanie would end up with Morelli in the end, and if she did, she's definitely cheating on him with Ranger. Katherine Heigl's strength is romantic comedy, which is how she approaches the role. I got this feeling that she was waiting for Prince Charming to rescue her from this life the whole time, not that she was a strong, independent woman taking a dangerous job to get back on her feet. With that romantic comedy approach to the role, the plot comes off more cutesy than anything. Switching in and out of a New Jersey accent wasn't helping my suspension of disbelief either. Honestly, I was disappointed more than anything else. There's an interesting quote from Stephanie in the novel in Chapter 3. Kathleen Turner would have made it look good on the big screen. I can't argue with that. Jason O'Mara as Joe Morelli and Daniel Sunjata as Ranger do a good job with the material they've been given, but there was more that they could have included about these two characters from the book to round them out as three-dimensional people rather than romantic comedy boy toys. John Leguizamo had a similar fate in his role as bad guy Jimmy Alpha. There was plenty of motivation in the book for Jimmy Alpha to do the things he did, but they rushed Leguizamo through this part like they had a cab waiting for him outside. The film was only 91 minutes, gang, including the credits. You don't have to make the sorrow and the pity here, but another 10 to 15 minutes of exposition wouldn't have hurt either. The supporting cast does a terrific job. G.K. Uma is a fierce, intimidating, and very scary Benito Ramirez. Sherry Shepard has a nice turn as Lula, while Deborah Monk, Adam Paul, and Fisher Stevens have some very funny comedic moments. This was also the final film role for screen legend Debbie Reynolds. I'll just leave that there. The script stayed pretty faithful to the novel. Notable differences included eliminating the character of John Cusack in favor of the stoner kid Cho, and upping the bounty on Joe Morelli from the $10,000 in the novel to $50,000 in the movie. Here's my issue. Upping the bounty increases the stakes for Stephanie Plum. But for that kind of money, there would be a lot more people after Joe Morelli, not just one lady who is 3 days on the job and another guy who just got out of the hospital. I thought they should have stayed with the book's ending, which builds to a showdown in Stephanie's apartment with Jimmy Alpha. Ultimately, the film came to a similar resolution as the novel, but I found the novel's ending to be much more satisfying. I think you know where I'm going here. This week's winner, The Book. What do you think? Did I get it right? Did I get it wrong? What did I miss? Let me know in the comments. Okay, gang, that's it for this time. Remember, don't just see the movie, read the book. And don't just read the book, see the movie. I'll be back on the next edition of Crime Novels to Film.